When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountainside. After he sat down, his disciples gathered around him, and he began to teach them. How blessed are the poor in spirit! The reign of God is theirs. Blessed too are the sorrowing, for they shall be consoled. Blessed are the lowly, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for justice, for they shall have their fill. Blessed are they who show mercy. Mercy shall be theirs. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed too are the peacemakers. They shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those persecuted for my sake and for justice. The reign of God is theirs. Blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of slander against you because of me. Be glad and rejoice, for your reward is great in heaven. They persecuted the prophets before you in the very same way. My sisters and brothers, this is the gospel of our Lord.
Praise
You may be seated. This morning I want to introduce to you a very, very special man, a friend of St. Matthew's community and my friend for the last 28 years. This is Father Charlie Ara. Would you welcome Father Charlie? Charlie has been here visiting St. Matthew's over the years, and I'm happy that he's here with us today, because today at St. Matthew's we celebrate a very special day in commemoration of a man who we believe is truly a saint. A man that was truly a prophet of God that lived in our own time, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I thought it would be a special, make this day extra special for us if we had Charlie here, because Charlie had the privilege and the honor 50 years ago, or about a little over 50 years ago, to march with Dr. Martin Luther King on that fateful day in 1963 when he gave his famous address, that prophetic address to our nation, "I Have a Dream." Not only that, but it was Charlie, when I met him back in 1985. I was at a wedding chapel doing a wedding for a couple, and the wedding coordinator said, "Do you know Father Charlie Ara?" And I said, "No, I don't." And she says, "Well, here's his card. You ought to give him a call. He's a Roman Catholic priest, but he's married." And she thought that we would have something in common. So that's how I met Father Charlie. And someone at the early Mass, when I was introducing him there, I said, "Well, you know what happens to married Catholic priests?" And Father Nick said, "Yes, they live longer." But they also lose their job. So isn't it great that we here at St. Matthew's can give Father Ara a job and listen to him and have him celebrate Mass with us this morning. It was also Father Charlie Ara who says, I know a young priest who's just left the church to get married, and I think you would like to meet him. And it was Charlie who introduced me to Father Jim Ferris. Father Jim, would you stand up?
Yes.
So take it away, Charlie.
All right, well, thank you very much. That's all this history, and well, going back so many years, I know all these people here, so many, and so happy to be in a faith-believing community. This is a community that's very alive. It's very inspiring. It's beautiful music, and the love that you have for one another, and the inclusiveness of it all. And yes, that's right. I was a parish priest, single and celibate for many years. And then, as he said, I got married. I lost my job. But anyway, we were married for a while. We didn't seem to be able to have any children. And I was sorry to my wife. Thought, well, maybe it was something she did wrong in getting married to a priest. But I said, don't worry, honey, it's just, I was single and celibate too long, you know, I just don't know how to do things. But anyway, so anyway, we started the adoption process, and that's when we started to have children. And before I figured out how to stop having children, we ended up with 5 children. And when I was single and celibate and used to live in the rectory, you know what that is, a home for unwed fathers. But anyway, and I used to be upset with people who came late to church on Sunday. And now that I'm married and have 5 kids, I don't understand how anybody ever got to church on time. But you know, I always say don't knock the church, because that's where we meet people. And I was being transferred to Lompoc, California, when the bishop said to me, not this bishop, but when the bishop at the time said to me, 2 days later, no, you're not going to Lompoc, you're going to Tustin, California. So that's where I met my wife, and that because of that, I now know Peter and Jim, and I know some of you here, and I'm just so privileged to see you again. Here, God bless. But see, because of the church, we all get to know one another, and we're all inspired. All right, now, put on your thinking caps. When I was a child going to school, the teacher would always say, put on your thinking cap. So right now you're going to put on your imaginary cap, you know. One of the great gifts we all have is imagination, right? And so I want to imagine right now, everybody here, that you are with me, and we are in Washington, D.C. on August 28th, 1963. And we are there because we have heard about this famous March on Washington. And I had come there with a friend by the name of Father Peter Beeman, and his wife, of course, was part of this congregation in the past. But we were there to give witness to this, to the whole idea of justice. Because in the 60s, you know, a lot of us here who are a little older, we remember the days in which there was segregation, right? In fact, I just saw the movie the other day, My Help, you know, about black women who were servants in homes in rich countries in the South, and they couldn't even use the same toilet in the house because that was only for the people in the house. They had to go to the outhouses outside. And you know, those were the days when, you know, restaurants were segregated by table, and buses were segregated, and blacks in the South didn't have the right to vote, and you know, you name it. Okay. But those were also the days where a lot of exciting change was taking place. The change was taking place. There were people like Joan Baez, who played the Kumbaya, and John Denver, and the Beatles, and all those people. You know, the popular music of the day was, come on people now, shine on the brothers, let's love one another right now. All right. And of course, my singing is not as good as yours. But that was the spirit of those days. And so imagine, I'm in this, we started at the Washington Monument. How many here have been to Washington, D.C.? Okay, so, about half of you. So we started at on the Washington Monument, and it was early in the morning, and all these buses of people started coming in from Montgomery, Alabama, from New York, from Portland, Maine, from even Redwood City, California. He said, all these buses coming in with all these people. Wow, this is going to be a great event. Somebody hit me on the back. I go, uh-oh, this is going to be a riot here. It turned out to be Rabbi Henry Front. He was the rabbi in Redondo Beach when I was first stationed at St. Lawrence Parish there in 1956. And so I went to visit him and welcome him. And then the following week, I invited him to the Protestant Ministers Association. I'm getting sidetracked here, but and the luncheon of the Protestant ministers. So we went to this luncheon, and we get there, and Rabbi Henry Front is not welcome because he's a rabbi, and they only have ministers. Then they looked at me, and I had a priest calling. I think it's my thing, and they said, "No, we don't even have priests in our Protestant ministers meeting." So anyway, we left, and we got a call a month later, and they said they were sorry. They were sorry that this happened, and they invited us back, and within 6 months, the rabbi became the president of the South Bay Protestant Ministers Association. So, it's amazing. It's amazing how change takes place. I was kind of celebrating this one day with the rabbi at the Plush Horse Restaurant in Redondo Beach. And so I thought I would pay, so I ordered ham sandwiches, and I said, "Come on, Rabbi, have some of the good Lord's ham." He said, "Well, I'll tell you what, Father, I'll have some at your wedding." But anyway, but again, there was a Presbyterian minister who was Korean, and he could not buy a house at Palos Verdes, because in those days, Palos Verdes, was kind of all white. So and in the city of Torrance, was no blacks in the city of Torrance. So the rabbi and I decided to form a fair housing group in the South Bay. And anyway, that's how we all came together. So when he hit me on the back in the March on Washington, I looked back at him, and it was the rabbi. Okay. So what was interesting in the March on Washington, it not only brought together people for the goal of civil rights, it brought the churches together. The ministers, there were Protestant ministers, Jewish rabbis, Catholic priests, there were a lot of nuns there, and there were people of all colors and faiths, and it was just a marvelous experience. And so we started to march. They lined us up in rows of about 50 in a row, and next to me, unbeknownst to me, was a baseball player by the name of Jackie Robinson. Come on, stand up. And so imagine that. I'm in the same row as Jackie Robinson, and we're singing "We Shall Overcome." And what do you want now? We want freedom now. When do you want it? We want it now. The urgency of now. And it was just so marvelous. And we ended up about 100 feet. You can sit down. Thank you. Thank you. But anyway, so we ended up, I was 100 feet in front of the podium. Imagine, I saw some pictures up there. You don't see that up there? Some of you can see it, some of you can't. But do you see me there? I'm about 100 feet. Let me also say that it was a very hot day. The weather was hot and humid, and there was one speech after another. And when it came time for Martin Luther King to speak, we were saying, "Oh no, not one more speech," because it was hot. We were there from early in the morning. This is like 4 in the afternoon. And anyway, he got up and he said 17 times, "I have a dream." And each time he said that, "I have a dream," the crowd would roar, because everyone was listening to him. And of course, one of his most famous ones is, "I have a dream that someday my 4 little children will be judged, not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." Right? And I have a dream that someday the sons of slaves and the sons of slave owners will sit down together at the banquet of brotherhood. And he ended up, one of the things he ended up, that I have a dream that someday Catholics and Protestants, Jews and Gentiles, black and white will all be together and we shall overcome. So I'm just saying that sometimes in life we're so privileged to have all these experiences, but one of the things that Dr. King said during that speech, and he said this not 17 times, but he only said it about 5 times, he kept saying, now is the time. Because he was saying people who take the drug of the tranquil drug of gradualism. He said people ought to cool down, wait a while, people will get their rights eventually. He said, no, we don't believe in gradualism, we believe in the urgency of now. And you remember right after the March on Washington, the Voting Rights Act was passed, and a number of other things happened that kind of moved the society forward. So as you hear a lot of speeches today, including mine, about Martin Luther King, they're going to say a lot was accomplished. Really, a lot was accomplished. You know, for whatever else, I don't know whether Democrat or Republican, but the whole concept of when I was first a priest, I remember Governor Faubus in Arkansas not allowing little children, black children, to go to a non-segregated school, right? And here's 40, 50 years later, where the President of the United States is Afro-American black. But, you know, of course, the difference between a prophet and a kook, you know, sometimes is about 30 years, you know. So, but anyway, but what I'm going to say is, if I had more time, I'd probably ask you, what still needs to be done? Because all the speeches today will say more needs to be done. We're not there yet. We've made a lot of progress. We're not there yet. There's poverty, there's wars, you know, there are all these things. But let me just suggest one thing Martin Luther King would say today about now is the time. Because there are those that will say, let's take a piecemeal approach to welcoming into our country 13 million people who live in the shadows. You know, they're saying, hey, well, let's take our time, we'll figure it out a little bit here. In the meantime, families are being divided, husbands and wives are being divided, children are losing their parents because their parents are being deported back to some other country. So I am saying that Martin Luther King today would say, now is the time for comprehensive immigration reform. You know, the Bible tells us that we are our brother's keeper, and Jesus says, you know, the reading, the beautiful gospel reading about justice and righteousness. So now is the time, and that's the message that I would leave you with the following quote, that the work goes on, the cause still endures, the hope is alive, and the dream shall never die. God